Welcome to Our Montana. I'm Mike Penfold with Our Montana. Many of you know about the Pryor Mountains, but we're going to have a program today about that. It's going to give you some insight of what a fascinating place the Pryor Mountains are. It's only 40 miles as the crow flies from Billings, Montana. A place of deep limestone canyons. The south side of the Pryors gets 5 inches of rain a year. It's in a kind of a double rain shadow. You get on the south side of the Pryors, you think you might be in Arizona. It's that dry with cactus and the kinds of things you see in really dry climates. And then it climbs up to almost 9,000 feet where you have Doug fir forests and all the plants and animals. There's almost 1,000 species of different plants and animals in the Pryor Mountains. Then you have these really deep and gorgeous, almost scary in some places, limestone canyons that have their own flora and fauna in the bottoms of them. The Pryors are a place of Indian legend. We did a lot of work on the Bozeman Trail, and the Bozeman Trail was one of the early, maybe the first migration route as people came down after the glaciers started defrosting thousands of years ago. There was a green area that came down along the face of the Rocky Mountains, and the old Indian trails where people migrated down 13,000 years ago hits right at the edge of the Pryor Mountains. And today there's still a very special quality area for the Indian people. It's geologically fascinating place. Geology professors like to take their students there because the geology of millions of years is exposed where you can really see what happened. And I'm going to start today's program with a video produced by the Pryors Coalition. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But they taped Burton Pretty on Top, Sr., who is a Crow cultural leader. And he will do a pretty good job of telling you about the special qualities that the Pryors have for the Crow people. Watch this video with Burton.
Crow name for the Pryor Mountains. Bapu Awakawa. That's the name that we have for the sacred mountain. I want you to know that this group of mountains, the Pryor Mountains, Bapu Awakawa, that we want to keep sacred and holy so that future use, next 7 generations can use this in a sacred way. This is the doorway here into these sacred mountains. We get permission from the Creator to come in a good way. We get permission from the little people. We get permission from the animals, the birds, the fishes that's in these creeks, the eagle, other birds that fly up in the air. We get permission from them to come into their home in a good way, and we leave in a good way. The sacred mountain and the rocks behind me is that covenant between our people and the little people. One of the little people with his bow and arrow shot into this rock here behind me, and that arrow stuck into that wall. And from that point, they told us that whenever we came through here, that we needed to stop here at the place of the covenant, that we place a rock on that rock pile behind me. And as a little boy with my grandfather, we come through here, we would often stop and my grandfather would say a prayer. We would grab a rock and add to the pile. That gave us permission to go into the sacred mountain. Babela leches kobi kaga wagua hey ahele hele balala steak was BJJ. My name is Burton Pryor Senior, and my Crow Indian name that I received in a vision quest on top of the Crazy Mountains, Awakawi is what we call the Crazy Mountains. My Indian name I have received within that dream on the third morning of my 4-day fast without food and water. The name that I heard in that vision was Chirakshaduba. Translation means 2 mornings. The vision quest is something very, very important, something very sacred, because in our belief is that when you go out into the mountaintop or on top of a hill, some isolated place, go without food and water, you sacrifice your human wants and needs, and in exchange, your hope is that God will listen to your prayer and grant you what you have asked for in your prayer. And total, I have fasted 12 times. The Pryors are important to us in our human history that's been handed down from generation to generation within our oral history. And a lot of our stories, the origin of our people has always considered the Pryor Mountains, Awakawa, as very sacred to us, because on that particular mountain we have had skirmishes with other Plains tribes. When we went into that sacred mountain for protection, for shelter, they would often turn around and leave. The mountain is a place of refuge from enemy, a place of getting medicines, a place of getting our food, the buffalo, elk, and etc. The Apsaloga always believed that those mountains is like our place of getting medicine and herbs and things for different ailments. Also, in the mountains we find plants that we're able to take from the ground and eat for as part of our survival. The berries that we pick, the turnips and all these things that we took from the mountain again. So the bear root is used in our naming ceremonies. We use that in our ceremonies, we use that in purifications, we use that as part of our medicine. When one individual has a sore throat or an ailment of some kind, we take that bear root, boil it, and drink the fluid from that, and it eliminates your sore throat and illnesses. So also we have vision quest sites on different parts of the mountain, which are very important for us. Our leaders such as Alachchiahush, Pleniku, Biduush, Bell Rock, Pedachiwachbash, Medicine Crow. As young men, they fasted in those peaks. And we have some burial sites within those mountain peaks and those ravines that we use for burial sites in days past. So overall, that whole mountain is sacred for us. Even though some of it is off reservation now, we still, in our mind, we still claim them, we still hold those sacred. So the whole Pryors is very important for us. This place we consider as our church, our sacred place for prayer. Our church is the wilderness out here that God has put in place. It's our shrine. It's a place of worship, our altar that we go to for prayer. For many, many centuries, again, our oral history has taught us that we lived and were neighbors with respect with the little people. The Apsaloga, we've always recognized that the little people were here perhaps even before we were. We're willing to acknowledge that the little people have been here forever. And they lived in caves and hunted like we did, the bows and arrows, and killing buffalo, elk, and other animals for their survival. Because we were friends with them, we would often team up with them in our covenant that we respected them and their presence within those mountains, and they too had respect for us as people coming into that mountain for hunting and for survival. So we've always had the little people within our stories, within our history, our human history, and we know that it still exists today. The little people, beliefs are the same as ours. The use of the pipe, they too have. But they love to exchange with us tobacco. And those are things that we know in our very few encounters with them, that we offer tobacco to them in friendship and brothers and sisters. I'm sure that every individual that comes in here has a special interest that they have to come up here. And we had hoped that our non-Indian brothers and sisters that do come here come with the reverence and respect that the Apsaloga have when they come into these mountains, that we want to protect this area so that my children, especially my great-grandchildren, when they grow up and have their own children, that this sacred mountain will be there for them. We have always objected to unnecessary travel into and around this mountain. We have always objected to new roads being built, because more roads, the more travel by human beings that come into these sacred areas. All those things that are important for us, we don't want them disturbed. So, speaking on behalf of the animals that live here in the sacred mountain, they're the voiceless ones. It is up to us as spiritual leaders to protect those birds, the fishes, and everything that is calling this sacred mountain their home. We're trying to protect their area. They're the voiceless ones. Only we as human beings can speak on their behalf. When I come up here, I see those sacred places that I had visited many years ago with my grandfather. My grandfather that took me and raised me at the age of about 3 years old was not only my dad, he was also my mom, he was also my grandma, he was also my grandpa, all combined into one. We lived in the cabin up here before I started my schooling. And when I was 7 years old, we came off the mountain for me to go to school, grade school, in Crow Agency. And therefore, my first 7 years, the majority of those 7 years, I was in this mountain with my grandfather. So he shared a lot of stories with me of sacred places in this Awakawa, the mountains. My grandfather, Otto Bearground, was an individual that was a traditionalist, and oftentimes we drive up in this area, and other times we rode horseback to this spot. And whenever we came here, he'd roll out his bull durham, light it up and pray with it, and leave it at that site, so that good things will happen to us and good fortune and good health. So this area that we consider very sacred is still here, and we still tell the stories of where they saw the rope. It's something very sacred and holy to us. Even though we no longer see the little people in this area, Baizada, the elders of our people, when they come up in this area, they offer tobacco and pray and leave the tobacco here and leave their offerings here, so that the little people will bless them in a good way, and that misfortune will not come to them or their families. When we came up here, my grandfather would often sit with me like this, and he'd say, "Hey, look over there. Hey, Joshua, at river bottom, Bach, it's sacred. It belongs to the Apsaloga people. Across that river. Bighorn Mountains. Way over to the east. That mountain. Wolf Mountains. It point out this whole area and talk about Devil's Canyon, where they saw the serpent, and we're told to stay away from that area because there was something evil that was in that canyon, deep canyon. And to this day we don't go near that area. Even our young men hunting will not go to that area. Over here in the Pryors, Bachach gets sacred here. Bach, my grandfather would always tell me. Then he'd sit me down and then tell me stories of locations where they had vision quests. Up on the Castle Rocks, right where we had that ceremony and we laid down the rocks. That area is a location where our young men would climb up that rock that's shaped like a castle, and they would fast without food and water in that area. And we also know of burial sites in those deep canyons. Back in the day, when we lost one of our loved ones, we could not dig into the ground because of the rocky areas of the mountains. Whenever there was a rock crevice, large rocks like this, oftentimes the deceased would be carried and smudged and prayed with in a way that was befitting a warrior. And they would be put between two rocks, two bluffs, and they gave it back to earth. And oftentimes, those areas that's still up here, people of our people know of those sacred sites, and they still tell the stories of that individual being over there in that canyon. Over here in this rock ledge, such and such was buried over here. He died of pneumonia at that time. Bagupak Kolusek died from a sickness. This one over here died as a warrior. Ekyo Nuzog. They put him over here. For me to come up here, it's a reminder of my Crow spirituality and the time that I was up here with my grandfather and the teachings that he instructed me to follow. I still follow today, and in turn, I'm also teaching my grandchildren today of the do's and don'ts of life, of the spirituality, of our Crow beliefs, of our histories, of our stories. It has a connection of how we evolved as people from the time that the Creator made us and put us on this earth. So I want my grandchildren to know that knowledge, that they in turn will pass it on with their grandchildren, so that it will never be forgotten. My purpose coming up here is to reflect of the past and those stories that my grandfather shared with me, and it comes alive as I come in here, and I feel the spirit of my grandfather, my dad, and it's still very powerful.
What would you like to see from the viewpoint of your children or grandchildren going into the future? What would you like to see the Pryors be for them?
Very easy. Close all the roads. there's other mountains that people can go for recreation. This mountain is very sacred for me and my family and my relatives. I want to keep it sacred, but the more people that come up here for recreation, I saw today a lot of traffic coming up and down the mountain road, and also I saw a lot of four-wheelers going up and down the road. If I had my choice, I would close the entrance on both sides of the Pryors and keep this place in a primitive state, that our sacred land. Burial sites, most important, vision quest sites, teepee rings, stories associated with where they saw the rope, and the castle rocks at Pryor Gap, that all those sacred places will be kept sacred and holy for future generations to use in that way, not for recreation, but for spirituality. That's what I would love to see.
Bishonata Biesewagu Hakegadawe Ahoga.
Burton expressed to you how the Crow people feel about the Pryor Mountains extremely well. It's a very special place for them, and it's a very special place for us. The Pryors gets a lot of recreation use, and we always encourage people to, when you're into the Pryors, treat it with care. There are a lot of cultural sites up there that should be protected and not disturbed. If you happen to find something like that, enjoy them, sit and contemplate the people who created those sites, but leave them intact. If you want to visit the Pryors, I want to recommend you to a website that was developed by the Pryors Coalition. The Pryors Coalition is an organization that our Montana belongs to, but other organizations that are conservation or outdoor recreation minded, including the Backcountry Horsemen. This website is really pretty neat. It will you could get a master's degree just studying what's on this Pryors Coalition website. But if you want to visit the Pryors, it'll tell you what trails you can find, how to get there. And a lot of those trails are really pretty difficult. You don't want to just take a normal four-wheel drive on them. Pryors are a very important place for people to go use their four-wheelers. And we ask them to stay on the roads and take care of the place. Don't drive cross-country, because that will just ruin the countryside. Pryors also is a place where you can see the wild horses up on the high country. Those horses have some of the best genetic component of the old Indian ponies. They're a special place for horses. And if you're on those canyon rims, be careful. You can fall off of those. So it's just really a neat place. So get on that Pryors Coalition website. You're going to find a lot of good information there. And for now, let's go to the Pryors and take care of them.